Alright, so in this tutorial I'm going to quickly walk through some of the steps involved in creating a background image like this with some clouds that are volumetric and cast shadows on each other, but you may want to add some shadows, I don't know what you call it, the darkening of, there is no light hitting it there. Pardon my limited vocabulary there. So, okay, let's get started. I'm gonna go and clear the sky, clear the image. It's currently, if you look at image info, it's a 1920 by 1080. For reasons of sanity, I make it a little bit smaller just so that we need less time to wait for the results. When we render, it might be a little bit slow. I'm on a system that's about 4 or 5 years old, so it's not the very fastest. Let's give it half the size, and so that'll be 960 by 540. There you go. All right, so I'm going to store that, and there it is. I don't need this thing on the right side. Let's go minimize that. These stored images might come in handy. Let's go for the first one, which is the filter under the render sky. So this is the new sky. You have a couple of things. It's already showing what I left it at earlier this morning. As I was experimenting, you can look around here in this preview. You can change the type of noise. This is pretty high coverage. Let me reduce it a little bit. I like the turbulence mode, but feel free to experiment with the others. You may need to increase or decrease the persistence, lacunarity. Don't ask me what that means. It's a thing. And get to the point where you have also the thickness. So the clouds can be thin or fairly high thickness. Then there's also a level of absorption. If it absorbs less, you see more of it. So it's a little bit brighter. There's a phase, which is a bit more like showing some glow around it. There's an ambient, keeping them dark, keeping them a little bit lighter all together. And then the sun glare, that's the size. So if you move this preview on the left side, it's a little bit easier to move the sun glare all the way to the right, and you'll see it's moving very slowly here. Gotta go to about 1,000 before you see it take on significant size, and then it's kind of sensitive. But if you need something like this, a big sun, you can also change the color of the sun. But it will reset to something else if you use another parameter. This one here, the time parameter, that one will change the position of the sun and also its coloring. Right, and you can see as you do that, you can see how the volumetric clouds get to show the lighting like this here in this area in a different way. So they can actually, sometimes I see some big clouds casting others, shadows on the others, and so it's pretty interesting. But you might want to add some extra darkness on this blue sky part here, and that will be done with the Mystic Vision. So let's say we set the size for this. Let me reduce the size of the glare, sun glare. And I'm not going to talk about animation on this one. There is an animation feature, and so sometimes you may want to actually not see these clouds move towards you, but you may want to see them move sideways. So you might want to do that based on the directions, but I'm not going to focus on that today. This is just to create a single background image. And let's say that's it. So maybe a little bit more on the coverage there. And then click that, and it'll take a while. In the upper right corner, you'll see the progress bar. As I said, I'm not on the fastest systems here. It's probably a function of how many, I think it's using the GPU, but I'm not sure. No, maybe CPU, sorry. It's probably multi-threaded. But I think it'll matter a lot how fast your RAM is. The faster the memory, the faster the data can be going in and out once it's being processed. So I probably have a system with 2400 megahertz here for the speed of the RAM. These days, you buy a gamer PC, you're over 5000 DDR5. I'm probably on DDR4 or DDR3 even. So your experience might be significantly faster. Okay, so that's one step. Let's go store that. You now have a history of the prior and the most recent. And you can go to the next step. There's some filters I'm going to use. First of all, I'm going to adjust the dynamic range. There may be a little bit of darkening. Now, if that's too much darkening, I might want to use the interactive undo and say, yeah, okay, this was too little, this was too much. Let's go somewhere in between. And then the other thing, you might see a little bit, if you zoom in, you might see a little bit of graininess here. Maybe it's time to blur that a little bit. There's a couple of ways. One that I like is the light diffusion, which also has a dark diffusion. And you might want to use it in this case for dark diffusion if what you're focusing on is a little bit more on the dark side. And let's see, we have tone mapping, gain. It's not doing a whole lot here. But maybe the other one that you can also use is photographic filter, soft contrast improvement, and adjust the level here, give it a little bit but not too much, and then that way some of those grainy little details might filter away. You can also blur it, because sometimes you create a background that's going to be a background. It's going to be blurry. You don't want to actually really see too many details. So don't sweat it if it has a little bit of that. Go into maybe the bokeh blur or the Gaussian blur, and then you'll have that background the way you want it. Now, if you didn't want it that much blurry, let's go back to this and perhaps look at a few more things. Again, dynamic range might be useful. There are a lot of adjustments possible. Hue saturation value if you wanted different colors, contrast. You can also use the curves, and then so with that you can adjust very much, change it to a lot of different styles. Now, one thing I want to do also is cast some dark shadows from behind those clouds. So let's go store this and filter. Now that one is under the blur category. There is a thing called Mystic Vision, and with the Mystic Vision in the preview you say where that hotspot is, right? So not in the upper right, not over there, but right where the sun is. And it might be a little bit off if you have a different aspect ratio, so don't look only at the preview here, look at here too, and especially where the shadows will be cast. So put it into minimal mode, and then it's the dark part that gets to be cast around. And so here, something like this here might be a good spot. And then you can adjust the quality, keep it relatively high. Factor is how far these shadows are casting. And you could also, level is if it's too dark, too much, you can adjust that a little bit and apply it. And nothing prevents you from doing that again if you actually want to accumulate it a little bit more. So go back to blur. I think that's what I did. And go to Mystic Vision. Unfortunately here it doesn't remember your setting. It did reset it. So you're gonna go and post it here again, set it back to maybe multiply. That's very dark. So you could try that, or you could go to the minimal mode. And so again, we have those dark shadows cast, and maybe you want it this way, but not quite that strong. So let's OK that, and then again use the interactive undo, like this. Right, and say, okay, that was good. Now let's get a little bit of both. Store that. Again, maybe dynamic range. And then perhaps one more thing we want to do is add a glare, a lens flare here, or some star. And so there's a tool below the brush tool and the fill, line, linear tool, and curve tool. There's a tool called the gradients, and it's gradients and flares. Right click on that and you'll see a couple of tools. You also see them here in the secondary toolbar. But in particular the lens flares, select that. And there are plenty of presets and of course plenty of ways to spend precious hours instead of sleeping if you want to explore the presets and create your own. But let's take for example the quick shortcut. You take this one and then just drag, click and drag, and you'll get that sun added there. You also see some lens flares, and of course that's the intention. Photographers hate it. CG artists love it. I don't know, something wrong with us, I guess. And so what we do is we can pick maybe this one with the extra halos and do 2 or 3 of those. Right, so you can combine these lens flares. I like this one here too. This one is one of my favorites too. Very bluish. And there you go. Close that, store that. So we went from nothing to this, to that, to this, to that. And perhaps we can do one more time dynamic range. And again, if you like it darker, you can use the filters. There's plenty of them. There's probably more than 200 filters nowadays. tons of different options. And so one thing I'll finish with here is actually under the render menu, there is the geometry, render geometry. That's a new feature too. And one thing it's typically used for is to render some 3D objects. Now we do include some geometries here. So there are some test objects, and I added my own, some sphere maps. You're not going to see those. There's my test, I added that. But there's also foliage, and that's really where this one started. Is Dan had built a couple of 3D trees. I'm not sure what tool he used, but he then exported it and added his own textures, and so it's basically a nice collection of three-dimensional trees. And some of them are single click won't do it. You need to double click it. I'm going to go to the oak trees. Let's say this one, double click that, and there it is. So you can see that's a 3D tree. I can move it around or click here to move it in and out. What I want to do is, I think this one already has a texture. Yeah, it has a bump map or a texture map, and actually it's used as a bump map. And all I want to do is just put that there, maybe change the light a little bit, and adjust the parameters for the lighting. There's this setting here, gamma correction will keep it a little bit darker. Maybe that's what we need in contrast with the bright stuff here. Also tone mapping can be an interesting one. And then there is the additional material properties. So you have materials for the leaves and materials for the trunk. And if you want the trunk to be glowing by itself, you could add that. Most importantly, you can add some metallic reflection. Now, right now I don't have an environment map loaded, so I go here to select an environment map. Maybe I'm indoor, maybe I'm outdoor. I'm going to select something with a big bit of blue colors there too. Go back into the materials and adjust the roughness close to almost zero so that you see some of that metallic reflection. Although, of course, on this tree bark it'll be pointless, I suppose. It won't be showing really a whole lot, but you can see it's doing some changes to the overall colors, and maybe you'll hit exactly what you like to see there. So adjust that. For the leaves, I'm going to make sure there's no metallic. Interesting glow we can get out of that. There's also some clear coat. You can add a little bit of extra light there. Anyway, have fun with this, and the main reason for this is to add some 3D to a 2D environment. You may have painted it, you might have created it one way or another, and then the other things you can also do with that is, what did we do? Oh yeah, change the colors. One thing you can do also with that is to put it into a brush. So make a brush out of that, just this tree, whatever background here doesn't matter. But now we have rendered it with a transparent background into the brush image. And then so you can go okay that, and the image might be okay, but maybe you don't care. Let's just store it. But we also now have this brush. It took a little while to show, but we have the brush. And so you can go and enable the brush, and you'll see it here. Only the part that was rendered here is in the brush. It's not at full size. Let's make it so. You might want to flip it horizontally. I think that's X. Yep, and then maybe make it a little bit smaller so it doesn't look too much like the same. Maybe, oh, actually, here we probably need to make it a little bit bigger. And we can actually do that right here. So I'm going to go store this brush, store and manage a copy. So we now have two brushes, and this one is the flipped orientation, and I want to make it a little bit darker or a little bit bigger and fiddle with it some more. So I have perhaps some RGB, hue saturation value, make it a little bit darker, and so now you see it here. And if you make it bigger, you'll see it stand out from the other tree really nicely. So I'm going to do that, and there you go. So now you have a little bit more depth, and that's what it's all about. So let's go stamp it down. You could paint it around like this. That's a little bit too dense now. So I'm going to go stamp it with a single click here. And it may not have the keyboard or the mouse focus here, so you may need the first one to get it, and then a second one to actually paint it down there. All right, and of course, once we've done that, let's go hide the mouse, the cursor, and maybe you want to add a little bit of glow here again. So this is probably where I would actually go in with that lens flare again. Where are my lens flares? There it is. and say let's put this lens flare right here so it shines through, and maybe you can have it shine through a couple of places. If you have a big sun, it will be shining through in a couple of places here, and maybe there's one common overall glow added to it like this. And again, nothing prevents you from doing this again and again. The undo, interactive undo, which is okay, this was fully applied, this is 0, and then there's somewhere in between is where you like it. And okay, never too late to do one more, expand dynamic range or adjust the trees, the dark parts. That's typically here under hue saturation value, or this one here, the value filter too. You can do, you know, maybe more like a moonlit scene where everything is really dark. Adjust the value, adjust contrast, whatever feels right for your particular story here. Alright, thanks for watching, and let's see what you create.